Hello. My favorite books. This one is called Bridge Across My Sorrows by Christina Nobel. It's about this lady, an Irish woman, and it tells of her deprived childhood and the dream which led her to go to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam and start work among the street kids in Ho Chi Minh City. And there she is with some of them. I'm just going to read a short extract out of the book, which I have here. This is after she arrived in Ho Chi Minh City and she'd made contact with some of the children, and she's arranging to have a Christmas Day party for the children. And here's what happened. I went to the manager of what then was a very large restaurant on the ground floor of the Rex Hotel. He had on his dicky bow and his little black suit, and I could tell by the way he looked at me that he was a proper manager. "All right, me darling," I said to him. "I want to book your restaurant on Christmas Day. A private party I'm having for about 150, maybe 200 guests." He nodded in appreciation. The poor man assumed that since I was a Westerner, my guests would be Westerners. As he was around the corner from the lobby, he had never seen my crowd of children coming in. Him and his little dicky bow thought a big party of rich Westerners was coming to celebrate Christmas Day. "Now it's a plain menu we'll be having," I said to him. "My guests like to eat very simply, so we'll have chicken and rice and a big glass of orange juice. Can you do that?" He nodded. He was obviously a bit puzzled, but of course he could do that. The thought of booking the entire restaurant had the man trembling in excitement. "My guests will arrive about 3 o'clock, I told him. "Before we eat, presents will be taken from under a Christmas tree and given to my guests. There will also be a guitar player. This will be a grand occasion. Do you understand?" The man couldn't stop nodding. He was very pleased. This was an extremely prestigious event for his restaurant. For the next few days, I never stopped. I bought clothes for babies. I bought tins of condensed milk, packets of biscuits, and big boxes of sweets, all of which were wrapped in Christmas paper. Some of the Vietnamese people who were helping me grew impatient and wanted to take the presents to the party and pass them out unwrapped. The very idea appalled me. "Children must see wrapping paper," I explained. "They must have something to unwrap. This is very important to them." It took 2 days and 2 nights to complete all the wrapping. I spent the 23rd of December 1989, my entire 45th birthday, wrapping presents. I told Tin, a Vietnamese man who had begun helping me with the children, that it was the most joyous birthday I had ever had. On Christmas Day, I put a green rosette on my blouse and green tinsel around my head. I had to show a bit of the faith, a bit of the Irish. Then I waited anxiously for the children. I knew if they straggled in one by one, that the police would take them away and the party would end before it could begin. So I told them to gather a block away and arrive all together at 3 o'clock precisely. At 2 o'clock I stood in the dining room and uttered a silent prayer that the children would not become anxious and arrive before the allotted time. I was also a bit worried as to the size of the dining room. It could only accommodate 150 children, and I was afraid there would be many more. I had appointed several leaders to count heads and make sure that no more than 150 came into the restaurant. I looked at the manager and his staff. The manager had everyone dressed properly. The women wore black skirts with red bows in their black hair. The men wore little red dicky bows and black suits. Funnily enough, it was the same way I dressed my staff when I ran my catering service back in England. "You look very smart," I said to the manager. At 3 p.m. I was pacing up and down, excited and nervous, as I checked the boxes of sweets and biscuits and the little boxes of milk with nipples on them for the babies. Dear God, I prayed, this is an important time for the street children. You'd know all about that. You're in a stable yourself, so make sure it goes all right. A few seconds after 3 o'clock, the children appeared out of nowhere. 1 minute there was nothing, the next dozens of big eyes were peering out of dirty faces through the windows and into the room. They had been concerned about the police and were determined their Christmas would not be spoiled. How they came to the hotel, I don't know. It was probably through back alleys and shortcuts no one else in the city knew. Now they began banging on the big glass doors. The manager was terribly annoyed. He motioned for some of his staff to shoo the children away. "No, wait, those are my guests," I shouted to him from across the room. The manager stared in disbelief as the children flooded through the door. A few mothers limping with illness and with babies on their breasts came too, but mostly it was children. They were scruffy and dirty and dressed in rags. Their noses were snotty. They had fleas and lice and runny eyes and open sores. They were shouting and laughing and pushing and banging chairs and talking and pulling each other away from the tables. Everyone was trying to get a seat so that he would not be left out. The manager, poor man, was transfixed. So was his staff. After a few minutes, the manager shook away his paralysis and came bustling forward. No, this is not good. No street children in here. No buindui. These are my guests, my beautiful guests, I said to him. And these are your children. They are not foreigners. This is your flesh and blood. Isn't it better to have Vietnamese in here on Christmas Day than foreigners? You've had trouble all your life with foreigners. It's good that Vietnamese children are here. I waited a moment. He was not getting the message. I leaned closer and said to him, "I have paid you, so make sure my guests have a good time." He backed away a step and looked at me. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head. He was still not quite sure what to do. I turned to the staff. Their eyes were locked on the manager, and I knew they were waiting for an order. I had to act fast. So I roamed down the line of waiters and waitresses. "You lot," I ordered. "Now don't be standing there. Get the orange juice. The children are ready to be served." I motioned them towards the kitchen. Then I ran into the kitchen myself and picked up a jug of juice. I had to keep the staff moving. I had to establish some momentum before the manager came to his senses. The staff began bringing orange juice and places of food out and serving them in a very hurried fashion, pushing them across the tables. They were offended that street children had taken over their restaurant. "Don't do it that way," I ordered. I stopped them and showed them how the food should be served. "Do it proper," I said, "and give every child a smile and a squeeze. This is Christmas." One waiter was particularly mean. I watched him snap at the children and push them around. I came up behind him, grabbed his arm, spun him around, and shook my finger in his face. "You will treat them with dignity," I said, in a very sweet Christmas voice, "because if you don't, me darling, I'll break your neck. Do you understand me?" He did. I put on a hat with a big feather in it and began running about blowing a whistle, the sort that rolls and unrolls. Other whistles were on the table, and soon the children were standing in chairs and blowing the whistles and laughing. Then I was back in the kitchen. "Serve them faster," I ordered. "They need their juice." The staff was amazed that I was interfering with their duties, but they said nothing. I pushed them around and got the job done. Then something glorious happened. It began when I put my arms around a particularly dirty and scruffy child who had been pushed off a chair and was sitting on the floor, crying his little heart out. I kneeled, pulled him to me, and kissed him. I held him until he stopped crying, and then I gave him a whistle and put him in a chair. I looked up and I saw a transformation taking place in the eyes of several waitresses who were watching. There was a universal look of love, the same look that people everywhere give children. And suddenly everything in the room slowed. The children were being served slowly and with dignity. The staff were laughing and talking to the children. Suddenly it was okay. Suddenly the staff saw the street children as human beings. Suddenly we had our Christmas party. In that moment, it was all worthwhile. I realized that if one person at that party had changed his mind about how he perceived these children, if one person no longer saw them as boy doi, but as children, with the same tears and the same longing and the same feeling as any children, then the miracle of Christmas had taken place. Thank you, God, I whispered. After everyone had eaten, I stood at the front of the room and sang Jingle Bells and I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. Of course, the children didn't understand the words, most of the words, but they understood the feeling. I tap danced and sang, and the kids roared with laughter. I apologized to them for not knowing any Vietnamese songs. After the guitar player had played and the singing was over and the gifts had been distributed, the party began to wind down. I said to the manager and the staff, let's all hold hands and sing another one. We'll sing, We Are the World. After all, we are all the same. The manager announced in Vietnamese that we were going to sing one more song and that the children should listen closely as I told them the words in English. Slowly I repeated the words. Then I had the children stand up and link hands. The manager and the staff all held hands with the children. Then we began singing. They forgot most of the words, and the only place where they sang loud and clear, and as one, was at the words, We are the world, we are the children. I looked out over their little scabby bodies and dripping noses and heads raw from lice, but all I saw were the smiles on those faces and the light in their eyes. This book that's shown here was published in 1995 by Corgi, and in 1998 another book called Mama Tina was published, and in 2015 a movie just called Nobel came out, directed by Stephen Bradley.